Well, whoa, boy, what the heck's going on here? Yikes. Get that out of there. That is not intended. Hi, everybody. I can see that I'm clipping a little bit, so let me just pull that down a bit. There we go. I got words on my face. Yeah, no, the words were not meant to be there. They were ghost patrons. That isn't even the right Patreon scroll. No, it's not. Although the Patreon scroll, also my topic is incorrect. You can tell how organized I am for this. There we are. I'll just fix that there. So the overall deal today is that we're not ending our campaign. That's kind of like the first and most important thing that I need all of you to be aware of. We are not ending our Sunday campaign. This is because we asked our patrons over on our Discord what they might want to talk about, and the ending of campaigns was brought up. So that's what we're talking about today, among other things. Obviously, if there's anything that comes up in chat, then by all means, please just throw us out there. But yeah, other people's games are ending. That's true. So, why is the chat is also not updating on here properly. Hold on. Why is the chat also being annoying? Is it because... Yeah, because people's Kung Fu Fenders is showing up here, but not everybody else's. So what's going on here with this widget? Let's just, there we are. Okay, well, it seems to be working now. We'll find out if that's going to be a problem, but I'm going to refresh it and see if that's going to make a difference and just say like, hello, this is a message. There we go. Okay, so it seems like it's cleared now. I'm on a different machine, and I was pretty busy at work, so I didn't get a chance to take a break and to fix this up. But we're here now, we're here live. Just the reality is that there aren't a lot of people streaming this week, and people asked about the ends of campaigns. So here I am. Now, first and foremost, 100 more sessions, right? So we're talking about that. Montreal by Moonlight is, if I'm going to be blunt, we still have no plans to end Montreal by Moonlight. We have no end date. We have not figured out what we're going to be streaming next. We are I continually am talking with the other folk about what are we doing here? Are we going to continue this way? Are we going to continue playing this campaign? How much longer do we think we have? So the answer is a bunch. I would wager to say that the campaign's not going to go on for at least another 100 sessions, Zablika. That's just off the top of my head, but I kind of doubt it. And that's not because there isn't enough stuff to happen in there, but also there comes a point where characters start feeling like they're getting a little long in the tooth, that there isn't a whole lot that you can do to change their character sheets so that's why we're kind of there at this point. So I wouldn't be able to tell you whether it's going to be 20 sessions or 30 or 50. All I can tell you is that it's probably not 5. So sports ka-ching. So that's the first thing, is that this isn't a panic moment. But Pinky Pact, for instance, our friends over at twitch.tv/PinkyPact, they are winding their campaign down. And so I think that's part of the reason why this is in here. But yeah, let's take a look and see what we can do to talk about a lot of things when it comes to it, because I've got a lot of things that were thrown at our Discord. Questions about when you're winding down a campaign, what's involved. And the first thing that I'm gonna throw out there is actually a a question that was tossed out by Captain Splooey. So I will throw that in here. So before the finale, how important is it to have a conversation with the players? Here's the thing. The NPC gallery is dropping like flies. Here's the thing. I preferably would say that you want to have a conversation with your players well in advance of when you think the game should end, but that depends on how long the campaign is. Maybe you've just find that the campaign is going to last a certain number of sessions right from the beginning, from your session 0, at which point I would say that, 1 or 2 sessions beforehand, you should probably tell them, hey, don't forget we said that we were going to end the campaign at this point. But maybe you're running a more open-ended campaign like the ones that we run here. And those campaigns last a long time. If I said to my players, hey, so next session is the last one, then they wouldn't be able to wrap up everything that they'd want to wrap up. That's not something that I want to leave in their... I don't want to leave them feeling unsatisfied in that way. So since our campaign has been going on now for over 100 sessions, I'd probably want to give them at least 5 to know what's going on. But it's really variable based on how long you've been playing and how many loose ends you think that there still are that you need to wrap up. Yes, there is a version of exclamation mark Q. Let me just make sure that that is active. There you go. So that should be, if you do an exclamation mark and a Q and then a space, then that will go into my my queue here. So by all means, please do so. That'll be handy. Does Q work? Well, it does now. So yes, the answer is yes, Zablica, it does work. When we are in the process of winding down a campaign, making sure that there's enough notice is important because surprise ends tend to feel kind of rough. But that is, yeah, I have to get all the final kissing in. Osab, yeah, absolutely. That's totally what it is. But there's more to it than that, which is figuring out when the campaign should end in the first place. How far in advance can you know when a campaign's supposed to end? But I would point out that the end of a campaign isn't a storyteller decision necessarily. It's everybody's to a certain extent. If one player starts feeling like maybe the game needs to be wrapped up, then I would say that that's probably a good time for that player to speak up. Maybe after a session or between sessions and just say, I wonder whether we are on our way to finishing this up. The storyteller sometimes is in a better position to discuss this sort of thing because they kind of have the framework of the story in mind, and so they sort of know, well, we're in Act 3, we're starting to wind this down, or I am seeing that the big bad is coming up, and then once the big bad is defeated, then that's going to signal the end of the game. But players can as well, because what's really important is something that Kung Fu Fenris mentioned here, which is that it's really important if someone says, I'm not having fun, that's kind of a big signal. It doesn't necessarily mean the end of the game. It might mean that there's just something that you have to change, something that you have to fix. Maybe the player just needs to see a change of scenery, or maybe there's something that you can do to have a conversation with the player so that they can understand ways in which their character might be more effective or the like. You have to identify why they're not having fun. But you generally want to end games before this happens. But here's the reality, folks, and this is something that everybody here probably already knows, but we're going to throw it in here anyway. The vast majority of tabletop role-playing games end because they fizzle out. Because a player quits and then it just doesn't happen again. Or everybody gets really busy and they keep promising that we're going to get back together again and we're going to play, and it doesn't happen. Or, hey, the place that we were always playing at, it closed and now we can't go back, so we have to find a new place to play and we never got around to it. Or very simply, somebody decides they don't want to play anymore, and then the rest of the group decides that it's not worth to continue. That's how most end. Ending a campaign is actually a luxury, but I argue that it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't have to be. There are ways to make it so that you can almost, not guarantee, but you can almost be assured that your campaign is going to end when you want it to. And that is to actually figure out about ending and to talk to people about when and how they would like to see the campaign end. Pretty famously, when it came to Changeling the streaming, I actually around session 80 started talking about like, do we want to end this campaign? And the answer at that point was no. And I was fine with that answer. Okay, that's great. But I had already planted the seed at that point. I had said, I am starting to think about how this game may end. I am starting to think about how this story should be wrapped up. And even though we managed to get another 50 episodes out of it, more even, we still had the thought in our head that at some point the campaign's going to end. Because there is something here, this was actually brought up in our Discord, so I will call it up here. Where's my, there we are. This is from the Nom Hair, which is, when does leave them wanting more work? Is it always a good thing? Well, that's a really tough thing for people to accept, but the answer is 99.99% of the time. I'm tempted to say 100. The answer is yes. It is always a good thing to leave people wanting more. But the trick is you don't want to leave them wanting, you don't want to leave them unsatisfied. You don't want to leave them feeling like there's too many things that haven't been wrapped up and there's so much potential that's left on the table and there's so much more that we could have done to make this a satisfying game. What you want is to end the game when players are going to say, you know, I was having a great time and I feel satisfied with the ending. I wish that it could have gone on longer, but I'm glad that it's over the way that it did. That's the goal. With anything, with books, televisions, movies, the thing that you don't want is for people to start looking at their watch. I see theater a whole bunch in and around Montreal, live performances, and one of the ways that I can tell that I'm having a good time is that I'm never tempted to check to see what time it is before the end of the play. I don't. I'm not somebody who will, pull out my phone, or my watch even goes dark when I'm watching a play. I don't want people to be distracted. But it is, if I'm ever tempted to be like, okay, well, the play started at 7, and I know that the play is supposed to be 2 hours long, I wonder if it's 8:55 yet, because that means that there's only 5 minutes left. That's usually a bad sign. That usually means that you're overstaying your welcome. Aside from outside time pressures, what you don't want is for somebody to be thinking, okay, well, I have to go to this session, and I wonder how many sessions we have left. The instant that somebody starts kind of doing the calculus of being like, how much longer is this going to take, and am I going to enjoy it for that long, is when you've probably already gone for too long at that point. You don't want to, just in the same way that you don't want to put on a play and then be like, well, we cut the last act because it was going too long. Well, then things aren't resolved. People don't feel good about it. But what you do want is for someone to be like, I wish I could spend more time with those characters. I wish I could spend more time in that place. I wish that there was more of the special effects that I saw in that play and that they were great. I really loved the way that the stage manager was calling those cues. If you're saying that, you're me. But otherwise, you're probably, if you're saying that, then maybe the stage manager wasn't doing such a great job, because you don't typically notice stage managers. But anyway, it is a difficult tightrope to walk, but it is an essential one. It is something that I think a reason why a lot of games fizzle is because there's this reluctance. No, we're all having fun. We don't want to stop. Except that, are you having as much fun as you could be if you were playing a new campaign? Are you having as much fun as you could be if, for instance, maybe somebody could join the group who hasn't been there before, but they can't join in the middle of a campaign? It's a fallacy to assume that just because things are good now means that they will be good forever. That's not possible. But it is also important to understand that ending a game means that you can start another one. It's not to say that you can't have multiple games going on at once, but the idea that you can take the energy and effort that you're spending on one game and the time, and then putting it into a new one may mean that you're going to have overall more fun, because maybe there's a new system or a setting that you're really interested in trying. Maybe your players have other character ideas that they want to pull forward. Maybe you're just running out of ideas for what you can do in the current story. Maybe you're noticing that the story is coming to a dramatic conclusion and that it would be a satisfying ending for everybody. That's the important part of figuring out that it's time to end, not, but we're still having fun. We're still having fun is very important, because the instant that you're not having fun, you have to do something about that. But it can't be the assumption that having fun is the only thing that will last forever. Now, Avatar of Cain mentioning Mackers here. I do wonder how having concrete goals meshes with that perception. When I saw Eccleston's turn at Mackers a while back, they had a clock on counting down to his death from the witch's meeting. I know the play must end, but as soon as it was made more overt, it became more onerous wanting to get there. So with tabletop role-playing game campaigns, it feels like there's a little overlap with that at times. Again, it depends. If the timer is too long, then you're a problem. Like if I came to my players today and I said, Montreal by Moonlight is ending in 400 sessions. Well, now they're already being like, fuck, how the hell are we going to fill 400 sessions worth of time? That's difficult. It's hard. But if I tell them equally, there's only 2 sessions left, well, how the hell are we going to get everything wrapped up in 2 sessions? That's impossible. So there is a balance to be found there, but by the time you announce the end of a game, you kind of have to talk it out with everybody else at the table. Making a unilateral decision on these sorts of things is a recipe for disaster in a lot of ways. I really prefer talking with the other players to make sure that everybody is on board. I can make my case. I can say, look, I think that I have about 6 sessions left in me to wrap up the plot. And then somebody else might come back and say, okay, but I'm going to want to make sure that there's a session where I can, return home and have my heroes welcome and marry my sweetheart and discuss what's going to happen as my character retires. And I can be like, okay, well, maybe it's not 6 sessions, maybe it's 7. And then another player might say, okay, but if we finish in 6 sessions, then that means that we can have everything out before I leave on vacation for 2 months. And I'd really like to get the game wrapped up before then so that there isn't like a 2-month wait only to have one last session. So having that conversation with everybody means that not only are you figuring out the best time, but then everybody also feels like they've got a certain amount of agency. And agency is important in these sorts of things. If a player feels like they matter and that their decisions are important and that their feelings are listened to, that everybody is heard, that everybody has a vote, even if they don't get what they want, that's still a lot better than somebody coming up and saying, we've got 4 sessions left, tough shit, let's go. Avatar of Cain, not necessarily. It's not a faux pas. First of all, there's plenty of people who will just say the name of the play outright. Like that's, I do this, in all honesty, I do it more because of the number of theater people I hang out with, more so than the amount of superstition that I have myself. But yeah, you're not supposed to say the name of that particular play. There's just different ways to say it. Some people call it Scottish play. Some people call it Mackers. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. The PBs with a vote. So that's that's a conversation that you should be having. This is not a situation where you're going to be spoiling the ending more so than you're going to be setting everyone's expectations, because setting expectations is one of the best things to do to establish happiness in a group setting. If people don't know what to expect, it can be pretty rough. That can be pretty rough. But Namhair also added some things in terms of finishing too soon, or leaving people wanting more. What if the players want more? Well, you kind of have to make the case that it's better to end well than to keep going and fizzle. The longest campaign I ever played in was over a decade long, and we played a lot. It got to the point where we were, like, when we started, we were playing like once a week, and then we started playing more than one time a week. And then after a little while, it kind of turned down to like once a week again, and then maybe once every 2 weeks. But like, it was going on for quite a long time, 13 years, and it fizzled. It fizzled because I had 3 players and 2 of them broke up. That's why it fizzled. It just meant that there was no game to be had anymore. And I gotta tell you, I wish I'd ended that game 10 years earlier. I would have rather played only 3 years of that game. Even though I had a ton of fun throughout the entire lifespan, I would have traded 10 years of that game just to have a good ending than to have it fizzle because of an outside issue. So yes, if the players want more, let them make their case. But I will also remind you, if you say that you want to finish the game, your leverage is your presence, right? Like I could say, I have 10 more episodes of Montreal by Moonlight in me, and after that, I just have no ideas. And my players can say, we want 50 more episodes, and I can be like, I don't have them for you. I just don't have that much in me. And they kind of have to respect that to a certain degree. Now, I don't want to force anybody. And like I said, have it be a conversation, but it is something that I've noticed players will resist games ending sometimes, and you kind of have to encourage them, let them know better to get that good ending than not. What if they don't want more, but a clean cut stop? As in, like, I guess, let's end the game right here and right now. If everybody wants the game to end, great, do it. I'd recommend that you should probably have the discussion before the play completely stops. But if everybody at the table is just like, that feels like a great place to end, and so we'll end, no problem. What if it's a mix? This is an interesting question. What if people can't come to a conclusion? What if multiple people have multiple opinions on when the game should end? In general, at that point, you gotta negotiate with everybody, figure out the best solution. But in general, at that point, it's the lowest reasonable number is going to be the how much, because otherwise you're going to get people who will start just checking out if you can't negotiate them up. And above all, if you're the storyteller, you don't get the only vote, but you kind of get a veto. You get a little bit more consideration, if only that since you're the one running the framework, if you can't fill that framework, then that's kind of a non-negotiable at that point. Should the notion be table decided, not just the game runner? Like I said, ideally, yes. But if you gotta veto it because somebody is leaving, or somebody's just out of gas, or somebody's not having fun, that's the thing that you have to figure out. All right, let's take a look at the questions and answers here. Flower of August says, what about abrupt stops? A character dies and has to be retired, and that kills some people's interest in continuing. Yes, this is absolutely a thing. People have asked me, would I continue, for instance, Montreal by Moonlight, if one of the PCs died? I would continue, but probably only for a session or two at that point. Now, first off, I would not kill a character unless people were okay with it. And that I know is it's a statement. It's a statement that some kind of hardcore gamers are super against, and I think people are starting to kind of understand and get into it a bit. Games that are much more video gamey, Dungeons and Dragons, for instance, where a lot of it is based on math and it has a big, deep wargaming background. These ones have death as part of the mechanics. But in games that are more story-focused, story, narrative, characters, I just believe that you shouldn't kill a character unless everybody says that that's cool. Again, the person who has the most say is probably the player who's playing the character, but I would also say that it's important that you get buy-in from everyone else at the table. It really sucks, for instance, if you're playing the healer of the party and then one player comes up to you and says, I want my character to die. And then the healer is like, well, I want to help. And you're like, nope, you can't. Too bad. The character's dead. Well, then the healer feels pretty shitty because their entire purpose is to keep you alive. And you just said that it couldn't happen just because another player wants to die. It's rough. But death is the sort of thing that can be a negotiation between everybody at the table. And if I was doing that in our campaign right now, if I saw an opportunity where I was like, this would be an interesting moment, this would be an interesting story if this character did not survive, and I saw the opportunity, I would raise a safety card. I would probably raise the pause card at this point, possibly even a stop card. Although stop is really more to indicate that you're not okay. Pause would be more appropriate in this case, but it might engender the need to do a stop card, like okay, we really all got to stop and talk about this for a second. I would raise a pause card and I'd say, I might kill this PC here. How do people feel about it? Because I would also tack on to that, if I do, that means that this game is now on a clock. We've got maybe 1 or 2 sessions left, because I don't want that player to have to sit there and just watch for another 20 sessions as everyone does it, or just be like, okay, great, your character's dead, goodbye, you're no longer part of the story. It's not what I think we should be doing. So I would say, I'll take an example here. If Macros were to be killed, well, I would want Kate to still be able to play out Macros' story in that moment, right? Like figure out how Macros dies and how can we make that moment feel sufficiently good in terms of the story. It doesn't need to be epic, cool, bittersweet, horrible. There's a lot of different ways to play it and all of them could be valid. But then afterwards I would say, okay, well, we're going to wrap up this session and maybe we'll have one more session as a denouement, but understand that that's the end of the story, because I don't want to force one player to just be like, well, I guess I'm not playing anymore. And the game has gone on for over 100 episodes at this point. Killing a character and then bringing in a new one might be too disruptive. It might be difficult for the game to survive at that point. Some games, maybe that's an option for you and go for it. But in this case, I would be hesitant to say that I could kill Macros off and then Kate can bring in an entirely different character and proceed as normal. I'd rather just put everybody on new characters. So the thing is, if a character dies or has to be retired and that kills somebody's interest, I would say that you would treat that as a chronicle ending event, a campaign ending event. But I wouldn't end it immediately afterwards. Let the denouement happen. Let the players whose characters survived eulogize the dead character. Go back home, figure out what's happening, find ways to involve the player whose character is dead. Let the story still have its ending, right? Because otherwise, again, that's a fizzle. That's a game that ends because of an event, even though it happened in game in an unsatisfying way, and you don't want that. As much as possible, you do not want that. You want people to have the game end with a proper ending. So that's what I would do here. If it's an abrupt end, it should not be as abrupt as that. But if you're killing a character, you are doing that knowing that you could potentially be ending the story at the same time. And that's kind of the important bit. Zablica mentioning that even in D&D, letting characters die when the rules say they do without player agreement seems to be getting unpopular. Yep. Critical Role, I know, like, look, I'm not a critter. I have great respect for Critical Role, obviously, but I'm not somebody who watches. But I know that, for instance, Matt Mercer hates resurrection in these games and makes it much more difficult, if impossible. And I agree. I think resurrection stinks. I think that it means that death is now an inconvenience, or it's a pay-to-win situation, which maybe that's the kind of campaign that you want to tell, and I can see that being an interesting story, but only if it revolves around that. The idea that, well, you can die, and that's sad, except it's not really that sad because we can just resurrect you if we find enough money to get the materials that we need and to pay a cleric to do it. Like, it's just, then how do you end somebody's story? How do you threaten somebody in that way? It robs a lot from a game, but I'm all for the idea that you can't kill a character until the player wants to be dead. Because there's so many ways that you can do that make the story work in that respect. So I agree. I agree with that. Now, there's a couple of other options here. You could kill the character, and if you're in a campaign where that's you're early enough in the campaign that you could bring in another one, great, just go ahead and do that, no problem. You could have a campaign where killing a character and then replacing them with a new one is easy to do, or maybe you have a lot of characters and a player needs to leave the game, and you still have enough characters left, enough of a story left that you can maintain that, and then the player who's leaving is not going to be insulted or have a problem, that the game will continue and the other players are okay with somebody leaving. Like, that's fine too. So that's, sorry, Flower August, I'm laughing because your last two comments are great. So that's another thing to take in mind. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the end of the game when you kill a character. It depends on the campaigns. Mine, past a certain point, I start feeling like you can't replace. And it's definitely not an XP question. It's more of a, hey, these players have been putting a lot into this story with these characters, and it can be difficult to add another character in and have it feel like the story is the same. Think of television shows. How many times does a television show add or remove a main character and it works? It's possible, but it isn't easy. And oftentimes it feels like you're getting diminishing returns. I didn't watch The Office's later seasons, but once Steve Carell left The Office, the American Office, not the original, once he left, they replaced him. And the show went on for a little while longer, but like, was it better? Maybe not. Maybe it would have been better if they just ended the whole show. But in that situation, it's not a couple of people around a table trying to have fun. That's a lot of people trying to make a lot of money. So that's what you kind of run into there. At any rate. So let's go back to some of the questions that... I don't think that's off topic, Zablica. Geist has an interesting relationship with character death. Yes, but that's also the point of Geist, right? Like, that's very much in theme with what they're trying to do. So I would argue that that's a bit of an exception, a bit of a difference, just based on this itself. All right. So Splooey asked a bunch here. So let's throw in some more things here. Once the big bad is defeated, is it over, or do you allow for some summary sessions in the following weeks? Yes, you allow for sessions at the end. I do think that most stories benefit from a denouement, which lets characters go home, which explores how the universe has changed based on the party's actions, which lets you resolve the ties that may not be directly related to the defeat of the enemy. Romance subplots or the like is all kinds of things that you can do, and maybe you're gonna need extra time after you defeat the big bad for that. Again, depending on the length of your campaign, this might need several sessions to do. If you play a campaign that lasts 3 episodes, you don't need to then tack on a whole 4th just to wrap things up unless you want to. But if you've got 50 episodes under your belt, you probably are going to want to do that. You're probably going to want to let your players have that kind of denouement. Just remember that if a character is dead, you should still invite the player whose character has died to come back for those sessions. Don't leave them out just because their characters can't necessarily be present for that. What kind of things do you and players look for in a satisfying ending? So, a satisfying ending means that the characters have reached a point where there are fewer important questions than there are answers, is one way that I heard somebody describe it. The thing is, you can poke holes in that statement by being like, well, if the person's only 15, they've got so many years ahead of them, so many questions. That's not really the point. The main thing a satisfying ending does is that it lets people feel like they've explored the story in a way that they know how it ended, and that they have a feeling of the story as a whole has told what it needed to say. The characters have progressed to the point that you are satisfied with their progression. It does not mean all ties wrapped up. It doesn't mean all loose threads are accounted for. It does not mean that even that the enemy must be defeated. What it means closer to is you want to make sure that any questions that have been left unanswered are fun for people to think about, potentially, but that it isn't a requirement for things to live. I get a lot of flack from Aragorn, for instance, about Orange Jade, a concept that I hinted at in Exalt Witch Nexus, and then never resolved. But I was happy to leave that unresolved because it didn't really matter in the course of this story. It was something that was interesting that players were like, ooh, I wonder what that could be. But because it didn't really make a difference on the story that was being told in and of that moment, it didn't need to have an explanation. I don't need to necessarily answer all the will they won't they's about relationships as long as players feel that way. But I would say that the best answer to this question is talk. Talk with your players. Ask them, how do they feel about ending the game, but also what would they like to see in the ending? For example, for Montreal by Moonlight, we've discussed things, and there are certain plot threads that the players have said, I definitely want to see how this ends before the campaign is over. Great. I'll make sure that those plot threads are wrapped up. But I'm not going to say that all plot threads will have to be wrapped up, especially because some of them may be discarded by the players. They might be like, well, we don't really care that much about it. And some of them might be so wide-ranging that they would mean that the game would have to go on a lot longer, and the game is ending for a reason. So if you ask everybody, then that's important. Some of them might just focus on the denouement. Some of them might just be saying things like, I want to make sure that I get home and confront my high school bully one last time. Okay, great. We'll make sure to include that, but that's not really important in the main plot. But in general, you want to be like, what plot points do you want to wrap up? What mysteries do you want to have solved? And that is still a conversation. You can say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend the time doing it. That's fine too. That's okay. It's all good. Here's a question that I know is going to have a difficult answer. This is also coming from Splooey. How long is too long for a campaign? Too long is I can't give you a number. What I can give you are vibes. It's too long if the game risks ending without an ending. If it risks fizzling, the campaign's gone on too long. If you are not having fun, it's gone on too long. If you are dreading going to game, or if you are dreading counting the hours, or if you're dreading counting the number of sessions that are potentially left, the game's gone on too long. If the game also feels like it's stalling. So a stall could be a progression question. My character's leveled up. Now level ups don't feel good anymore. Uh-oh. Well, if leveling up is one of the things that makes people really happy in your game and now they can't get the enjoyment out of that, that's probably a sign to listen to. A stall could be, my character's happy. They have no reason to continue adventuring. They've married the prince, they've built their cottage, and I feel like the story doesn't need to go anywhere for them anymore. Then maybe it's gone on too long. So these are questions that might help out. All I have to say is Orange Jade, and then Gwen shows up. It's fantastic. Introspection and confidence are definitely things that not everybody has in spades. But this is something that I will say. If you do not... Excuse me. If you don't practice a muscle, the muscle will never get stronger. If you can't talk with your players about what they might want or how they might want to go about doing something, if you can't have that conversation with them, then you'll never have the conversation with them, and then it'll never improve. If you swallow your discomfort and go for it, then, yep, you might not do it perfectly the first time. It's like a muscle that you haven't used before. You'll probably end up sore the next day, but each time that you do it, it'll become easier and easier, and then you'll find that it will actually help for you. So that helps. But too long is when you risk people just quitting. Too long is when you are trusting in the fun that you're having now and assuming that that is infinite. Because it's not. All right. Spoolie came up with some fantastic questions, by the way, so I'm very happy. How much control over the ending do you share between the group? Obviously, some choices are left up to random, but are there ways to adjust so it's more satisfying? The storyteller and the players have agency in the story. How much agency each person has kind of varies from table to table, and that's okay. There isn't a universal answer for that. For instance, at my table, I have a framework for the story and I let the players go and then I follow them. I improvise most of what happens in the game based on what they're doing and what they seem to be interested in. They have a lot of agency in that respect. But I still have a certain amount of control. And I always have a certain amount of control because at any point I can say, fine, the enemy that you're facing has ridiculous stats, or the ground underneath you crumbles away, or a nuke falls from the sky. Like there's so many things that I can do to screw with the game that players just can't, that the rules don't allow them to. But I share control for endings. I let people ask, like, what are you interested in? And usually my players are also, because they don't want to screw with the dynamic too much, will say, well, they're not going to say, I want the ending to be this, 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 and this. Instead, they say what they're looking for and things that they are interested in exploring. And then I take that into account. For Changeling the Streaming, Scott told me that he was interested in potentially having his character die. His character didn't die, spoiler warning, for a campaign that's pretty long. So I'm not that worried about spoiling that. Didn't die in the climactic big fight, was rescued by another player. But he didn't tell me he wanted to maybe die. See, in knowing what I know now, Kate, I probably would say that if you want your character to die, you should probably tell everybody, not just the storyteller. Springing death on people can be distressing in some ways. But I would prefer to have players say, I am open to dying. I'm open to a fate worse than death. I'm open to these sorts of things instead of demanding things. Because again, if it's a collaborative storytelling process, saying, I want this to happen can be less collaborative and more selfish. Saying, I'm open to this or I'm interested in this means that you're leaving room for people to play around that, to not force an outcome, because forcing the outcome is rough. There's always a nuclear option, Splooey, you're right. So I share control, but I don't say this is what the ending is going to be. I say, what are you looking for in an ending? And then we negotiate. And usually that negotiation ends with, here are some potentials and here are some things that we can look at. But I find that being open with my players, I've never had a demand thrown at me. I want this to happen and so it should happen. And instead it's more, I want to see this wrapped up. I don't know how, I don't know what the exact answer is going to be, but I do want to see something. So that's what we hope to give. Is there leeway? And leeway is a great way of putting this. Is there leeway given for rule of cool type scenarios because it's the finale? That's up to you. Some people might feel cheated if the game suddenly played loose with the rules because it happened to be the last episode, because part of what they get out of it is all of my decisions have led to this moment, all of the roles that I've made, all of the strategies that I've executed, and now none of it matters because who cares? So be careful about that. But I think in a lot of games, you absolutely could do something like that. Just make sure that you're not destroying the story for everybody just to get a laugh. But rule of cool is something that some games have all the time. And in some games, it might be worth it at the very end to have a moment where somebody says, I'm going to do something that's really batshit crazy, but let's just roll the dice and see how it goes. And you nudge it a little bit because it's just that cool. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's great. I have no objections. Let's go to some questions in the hopper before we go back to Discord. So Zablica a while ago said, do you think some peeps might prefer fizzling out to clean closure? By definition, fizzling is not clean. But also by definition, fizzling is, at least the definition that I'm using here, fizzling is an undesired outcome. I think some people might prefer fizzling because they just can't stand the game and they don't want to play another moment of it. But then I would argue that the game should have ended far earlier anyway. A game can end abruptly, and then everyone's like, that's great, don't touch it. Fantastic. That's maybe not the easiest way to end a campaign, but if everybody is super satisfied with an abrupt ending, don't mess with it if it works. But a fizzle basically means we kept intending to continue and then we never really did. That's the thing that I would say that you're not going to find. So Requiem asks, how might you handle it if one of your players approaches you because while they're still loving the story, want to continue playing but are not feeling their character anymore? I would discuss with them. And again, a lot of that depends on how far along you are in the campaign and how the story can respond to changes. If somebody's like 2 sessions in and they're like, I think this is great, but I don't want to play my character anymore. Sure, we can replace it. If we're 30 sessions in, it becomes harder. But then I also would ask questions surrounding what the desire is. Is it you don't like your character because of the stats that they have? Okay, well, we can fix that. We can fudge stats. Like that's something that I remember discussing a long time ago with somebody who said like, well, when you spend experience, it makes me nervous because I know that it's permanent. And I'm like, why does it have to be permanent? It really doesn't. My players have gifts. I've told them, if you don't like a gift, change it. I don't care. I want you to be happy. I don't want you to be stuck with something on your sheet that you're like, well, this isn't as cool as I thought it would be, or this doesn't come up when I feel like it should, or I really would prefer to have this other gift instead of this one instead. Fine, go for it. Change it. It doesn't matter. And sometimes somebody who's not feeling a character just needs permission to change. Hey, you think your character is boring? Well, let's talk about it. Maybe you've made too many decisions in your backstory that restrict what you're able to do. Let things go. Retcon your backstory, or I will engineer a case where we can fix things. Maybe you go home and you meet your mother, and your mother says, I was wrong to tell you not to join the army. Go join the army, and then you can join the army, and then that can be a new avenue for your character that you couldn't consider because you thought that since you wrote it in your backstory, you were never going to be able to do it. Things can change. But say somebody is really hellbent on ending their character, you might be in a situation where you're like, that is the end of the campaign at that point. It can happen. And it is okay to do that. If somebody says, oh, but I really don't want to change anything except for my character, I would say that that's a bit of a narrative disconnect. That's kind of like, how can you continue wanting to experience this story, but without you participating in the same fashion is tough. So there is Requiem also asks, yeah, I want you to be happy. Yeah, that's true. The Rusty Dagger was magic this whole time? Yeah, exactly. Would you say then that I think 3 session time to make changes a bit more loosey-goosey? I say 3 sessions to make, there's 3 sessions to make any change that you want. Just go for it. But in reality, for me, it's any and all. It's however long you want it to be. Because I think that we can all tell the difference between a player who's making a change because they think that they'll genuinely have more fun, and a player who's making a change because they're just trying to twink their character out. That's an easy thing to say. But I usually say in the first 3 sessions, hey, do you want to make any changes? Because that's a time that players might not feel comfortable coming forward and saying, yeah, I picked this auspice, but I prefer a different one instead. Oh man, I knew that I said that I really wanted to play a solar, but I think I want to play a lunar instead. These are times that it's early enough that you can make the change. Saying, I wish that I played a lunar instead of a solar when you're 50 sessions in, that's a little harder for you to engineer. But 3 sessions, that's easy to retcon. After 3 sessions, at that point, I'm like, you can still basically make whatever changes you want, just understand that some of them are going to be very difficult to explain story-wise, so they might rend a little too much at the narrative fabric. But in general, after enough sessions, players kind of know that the broad strokes are okay, so they don't have to worry about those. But things like stats, gifts, all of that thing, yeah, go for it. Make the change whenever you want. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't. The instant that you let go of that anxiety, you're going to realize that it never mattered in the first place. Just let your players enjoy the characters that they have. Now, if it's clear that somebody's taking advantage of that, well, then maybe it's a player you don't need at your table anyway. But you can say the point is to change things to make you happy, not to make you win. That tends to be the difference, I find. Because you can have a player who will be like, I bought this ability and it sucks, and I feel like I'm not doing enough in combat, and I really want it to be more effective in combat. Then I would be like, yeah, change it. If somebody said, well, now that I'm a certain level and I've changed my build around and I have this weapon and that weapon and I really want to change this, and I'm like, are you making this change just because you want to win more? Because you want to be that much stronger than everybody else at the table? No. I don't want one person to be that much stronger than everybody else at the table. I don't need you to twink out. I don't need you to min-max that hard. But that's, thankfully, I don't have players like that, just straight up, which, handy. But also, I think that if you keep that atmosphere at the table of, hey, we're here to have fun, we're here to play a game, and I want you to make the choices so that you can have the most fun, go for it. Now remember, for some players, strategy is a large part of their fun. That's okay, as long as that's a game that you can accommodate. It's very tough if the storyteller wants to play a hardcore tactics game and one player wants to play a hardcore tactics game and another player doesn't really care and just, makes their character sheet based on their ideas of what might be interesting or neat, and they're not min-maxing, and then they can't respond to the difficulty of the fights, and the campaign is 90% fights. That's a problem. And it can equally be a problem if you have everybody who wants to play characters that are a certain power level, and then one person shows up and they've min-maxed the hell out, and then every time that combat happens, the other players just don't bother participating because you have one person who can just absolutely blitz everyone else. That's an issue. So that's something that we have to pay a little attention to. We got to be a bit careful with that. All right, let's see. We had some other things proposed here. So MyFlow asks, I'll throw this in chat again. If anybody has, also, this does not have to be the only topic that's discussed today. If you have other questions or other things to weigh in on, by all means, throw it in there. If you have your own opinions, hot takes. MyFlow asked on Discord, how do you prevent or at least reduce the impact knowing things are going to end soon has on player enthusiasm, disregarding the situations where it actually makes things more exciting? In this particular case, knowing that things are going to end soon should always be a moment where it feels like the game is ramping up to an ending. If it's a situation where everyone feels sad about the game ending, you should really be discussing with them about why they're being sad. Is it that they feel like there's so much more to explore in this game? Maybe you don't need to end so early. Maybe you can keep going. Is everybody sad because they know the game is ending, but they can't do anything about it because you're moving away to Guam? Well, then it's kind of tough luck, right? Like, you can't not move to Guam. So, yes, people are going to be sad, and that's something that has to happen. But if player enthusiasm is dipping at the end of a game, that usually is a sign that the game's been going on too long, as opposed to the game is ending at all. At which point, consider shortening the game at all costs. Again, like I said, I would much rather have a short but actual ending than no ending at all. And if I say I need 10 sessions to end this game properly, but it turns out that I only get 3, I will thank the opportunity to know that I have 3 and I'll make it work. Fizzling sucks. You don't want it. I am not moving to Guam. I'm sure it's very nice there. Is that Changeling the Lost book in the background a lot higher than the New World of Darkness core book next to it? No, it is not higher. It is merely taller. The book that you're seeing there, the New WoD core book, that's actually the Mind's Eye Theater. It is taller. The Mind's Eye Theater copy of the New World of Darkness is a much smaller book. There it is next to my head, which is admittedly a big head, but it is smaller because it's meant to be held as you are moving around in a live-action role-playing game. So, this is a LARP book, which I thought had a lot of really cool ideas in it, and I never got to play it properly, and that was a disappointment. But I've seen better systems come out since, so maybe I'm not that disappointed. It has been a while since I've LARPed, and I don't know when the next time will be. Maybe never. Am I mirrored? Maybe I'm mirrored. But yeah, that's hopefully that answers your question. I'm definitely mirrored. Why am I mirrored? Oh, it's so that I'm mirrored because then if I wave my right hand, it'll look right to me here. That's the deal. I should probably just unmirror it at some point. There. Better? I mean, Gwen says, I've been balancing announcement / hype for the next campaign, personal and player, with love and desire for a good ending in the current. Yep. That's kind of what you have to do. I am really excited to see what's coming up next for Pinky Pact, like for sure. But that's a thing that has to happen, you know. That's one thing about ending a campaign that I am going to bring up that wasn't necessarily, although I might have missed it, that wasn't brought up here, is that I will sometimes get nervous about looking at new games because then I get excited about new games. And then I want to end the game that I'm playing so that I can play a different one. That is an actual thing that I have to pay attention to for myself. It's one of the reasons why we ended Exalted, our first Exalted campaign, Exalted Witch Nexus, when we did. Part of it was that I was like, oh wow, you guys got way strong, way fast, and we didn't even have the actual book. we had the pre-release manuscript kind of thing, and I felt the story was coming to a good conclusion anyway. But part of it was that I was like, but Changeling 20th is out. We can play it. It's not behind me currently. It's out. We could play this. This would be fantastic. And so it gave me a reason to want to end this campaign. Now, in that case, the campaign I felt like had run its course, so I was happy with it. But it can be awfully tempting to end a campaign when you're excited about a new one, and that may or may not be a good reason to end the game. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's a sign that you're fatigued with what you're currently playing and that it's time to move on. But new and shiny doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be better than what you have before. Just be cautious. At the same time, here at RPG Clinic, we will test games before we decide to play them because we've been burned one too many times. And I say this as the person who kind of did the burning. We didn't test Edge of the Empire enough, and I never really managed to shake the feeling like I didn't like the system. And then we started playing and I still didn't like the system. We even announced that our next campaign at one point was going to be based on the Legend of the Five Rings. And then after playing it for a bit, we realized the system was not doing it for us. And we started getting kind of uncomfortable about some of the themes in that game for a streamed game. So we now have to play things in advance. But the difficulty with that is, how do you play something in advance and not get too excited about it to make you want to be like, well, then fuck the campaign that we're playing now, because you don't want to look back on it and say we ended it too early just because we were excited about something new and shiny. So you got to kind of temper that. Streaming is a little bit different in some ways because sometimes you want to stream something if your goal is to attract attention from an audience. Then there's sometimes you want to do it when the hype is high. Like, hey, we want to play Werewolf. Should we play Werewolf when it's a month old or when it's 6 years old? Well, other channels might have a different priority than we do. We play games because we want to play them. Another channel might want to play Werewolf because they're like, we want the numbers of people who are interested in Werewolf to come in and see us, which is 100% legitimate. Because maybe that's your goal. If your goal is audience, you play by the audience, in which case go play D&D. But I don't mean that as dismissive towards D&D. I'm just saying that like it's a lot easier to get noticed playing D&D than almost any other game. Piggy Pack's original game was only intended to be a 4 to 8 month game, so going over a year was unexpected, but the story was designed to have a specific end because it was supposed to be short. And it's a pretty definitive end because it was also designed to be epic. So I planned campaign 2 to be a lot more open-ended so that we can play for longer. See, that's cool, Gwen. You comfortable revealing anything about that? You comfortable revealing the system that you're going to be using, or are you keeping the same players or anything like that? Obviously, don't talk about anything that you're not ready to announce, but I announce it here. Let's have some people listen in. So it is a thing that, for instance, I've been researching what our next campaign could be for a long time now, and I still don't have an end date for Montreal by Moonlight. I have a lot of options that I'm looking at. We've put out surveys. We have bought core books. You can't quite see it because it's just off screen. Or no, it's out. Did I not put it back? I guess I didn't put it back. Like the core book for Daggerheart we have here, right? Daggerheart we took a look at. Are we going to play it? We don't know. Maybe not. But we have to look at it in advance because we've also learned that the thing that we don't want to do is end the campaign and then be like, okay, now what do we do? We scrabbled. And we had a problem where at one point we ended a campaign early, Edge of the Empire, and we didn't know what we wanted to do next. Ended up playing a whole bunch of one-shots, which, you know, can be fun, but that's sort of like empty calories if you're only playing one-shots when you're used to playing long-running campaigns. Then we pivoted to Changeling, but we didn't really bake the setting as well as we'd hoped. I'm not proud of the games that we played in that interim, but I would say that we would have been happier had we figured out what we were doing in advance. So I kind of have to balance that. I have to balance the fact that I don't want to end my current werewolf campaign, but I want to find out what's happening after it and not get too excited about it and end up ruining it. So that is a thing. So Piggy Packs is still D&D in players, but we're going to try the new 2024 rules plus some house rules to make player versus environment more of a challenge, since player versus NPC is a skill I'm still building. Yep. Totally legit. I have gone on the record, I do prefer the 2024 rules. I'm still not a huge D&D fan, period, but I think the 2024 rules are good and are better, and I do think that some of the complaints about them, like for instance, the idea that you don't necessarily know what god you are associated with until level 3, or who your patron is or whatever, I think that those complaints are not invalid, but I do think that they're not nearly as much of a problem as people think they are, because you could always just say, fine, I know what it is at level 1. I just don't get the benefits until level 3. But I'll also point out that a lot of D&D games, especially among people who know enough to be upset by those rule changes, probably shouldn't be starting at level 1 anyway. Level 1 is tutorial level D&D. You usually want to start at a higher level than that. It's one of the things that I like about D&D, and also Exalted to an extent, where to some extent the system can give you a mechanical end if you so desire. I love World of Darkness 5th and Daggerheart, but it isn't quite the same. So Daggerheart does have a level limit. You can hit level 10 and there are no levels after that. So the game kind of asks you to hand out experience knowing that you have a certain point where character progression will stop, or largely stop. There's still things that you can kind of do to tweak, but D&D has level limits, right? Like D&D goes up to level 20 in 5th edition anyway. 4th edition it was 30. I miss 4th. I know it's weird, and I know that 5th edition is, like, for most people the better edition to play, but I really did like 4th edition, because even though I do most of my role playing as a story type person, I was a player in a 4th edition game, and I did love the fact that, like, everybody there was just there to do tactics and be goofy, and I thought the 4th edition had some really cool tactics in it. I really do think that 4th edition gets looked upon poorly when it shouldn't be. I think the main issue with 4th edition, recognizing, of course, that Aragorn says that 4th after 3.5 was so ass, is that 4th edition it's not the same game. 3.5, 3rd edition into 3.5 into 5th edition, those feel like natural progressions. 4th edition was like, we have taken a very loose framework and changed almost everything. And I loved a lot of those changes, but it's kind of hard to say like, yeah, this is the same game that you were playing before, just updated. No, it's not. It's an entirely different fucking game. It's an entirely different game. So that's the issue that I ended up with it. Avatar of Cain says that, Daggerheart is a bit too early. The character limit meant I couldn't quite hit the nuance between World of Darkness 5th being so open-ended versus Daggerheart being too early. It is something that we are running up to in our campaign. When I start hearing things like, I don't know what I want to buy anymore, that starts triggering flags in my head about should we be ending the campaign. It is not this is a sign that we need to end the campaign. It's just more like, that's one part of a checklist. And if enough things on that list are checked, then I start thinking, okay, it's time. So when players start talking about how progression is feeling unsatisfying, that's a good time to start reflecting. But the thing is, since a large part of our game is the story, the narrative, and the characters that's happening here, progression doesn't matter as much about ending the game as it might in, say, D&D. But it is something to keep in mind. All right. Let me just check the question and answer thing. Okay, here we go. Requiem asks, having played Werewolf for as long as you have, do you have a general idea at what point the players will be too powerful for you to offer a real challenge? That's impossible in this particular sense because it's the difference isn't can I offer them a real challenge? The difference is can I offer them an interesting and enjoyable challenge? I can always offer a challenge. All I have to do is not pull punches and start throwing characters at them that are strong, right? Like if I took 4 character sheets and the amount of XP that each of these players have spent, and I put them all on the sheets, and I crafted those characters specifically, and I played with as much tactical muster as I could, then it would be a challenge right away. And all I have to do is just add one more werewolf on top of that. And then the challenge is greater than what they would likely be able to do. But is that narratively interesting or not is the main question here. Is that something that the players are interested in doing? I do not have players who are super invested in tactics. They are invested to a certain degree, but they are not war gamers, right? Like that's, and neither am I often. So I am not interested in providing them with challenge in terms of like, oh, well, here is an NPC that is going to be really tough for you to take down mechanically. Because that I can always fucking do. I can do that anytime I want. But if that's not interesting, then that's the issue here. Now, the issue becomes when the challenge ends up being that the game can't support it because in order to threaten them, it has to either be far more lethal or it has to just be ridiculous. Like, okay, so the 3 of you walk into a room and there's Zizek and 7 copies of her are all standing in the room, and I have all of them completely statted out with all of their gifts, and I'm also going to make combat take 3 hours every time because I'm going to make every single decision for every character slowly and methodically, and we're going to put them all out on a battle map so that everybody knows where everybody is. Like, that's just not the kind of game that I think we're interested in playing. So it's less about challenge and more about, can I make this interesting anymore? And for some of that, that's the players might find that they're not interested in playing their characters anymore because there's nowhere for them to go. That's progression stall. It could be that they're not interested because their characters, in order to get a challenge out of them, they either have to feel like the story becomes too unrealistic, or because I'm not setting the expectations the way that I should. If my players succeed at 90% of their roles, which at the moment they do, short of brutal outcomes, they often just succeed. It's the level of success that they're interested in. But the instant that I start putting up a real challenge and I start being like, you don't hit, 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 well, then they can become frustrated. And that's not even a question of, oh, your characters are too powerful. That's just, well, up till now, we've played the game this way. Now you're playing the game an entirely different way, and that isn't what we're expecting, and so it's not fun. So really, the point that I will say that the players' power levels are a problem is when they feel like their progression is stalled, and that's a problem for them. Or they feel like every time they've accomplished something, I ratchet up the difficulty, but they're not getting enjoyment out of that new difficulty. I played through Silksong recently. Silksong is a tough game. It is not the hardest game in existence, but it's a tough game. And I 100%ed it. I did so with Kate next to me. We were playing through the game together. We had a ton of fun doing it. But I can definitely see that that game is not for everybody because they may not like the difficulty spikes that you hit at various points. Legitimate. But I also don't like a game that's easy at the start and never gets any harder. That's kind of where it's at. So here, I see that you have follow-ups, so let's go into there. Anything you can do, I can do better. So technically, yes, that's true. But the reality is also just in terms of the game itself, I think the players are having more fun if they're coming up against enemies that are not tactically complex, but that the story makes it complex. Do I kill this person or leave them alive? Do I rush in knowing that I'm risking the lives of other people? Do I attack a force that should on paper be stronger than me? Or do I, knowing that there's a risk that I could get my ass kicked? That's kind of where I'm at. Instead of just being like, yeah, I just made a character that instead of having melee 4, it had melee 5. Sometimes not knowing what to buy can simply mean they're waiting to see what comes so they can make worthwhile purchases. Yes, but that's not the same as what I'm suggesting here. It's not, I don't know what to buy because of that. It's more, I don't know what to buy because I feel like my character is complete. I feel like there's nowhere for me to progress that feels like it would be interesting anymore. That's the problem. Not, oh, I have enough for a gift, but I don't know which gift to buy, so I won't buy it yet because I'll wait until the end of this storyline. That's fine. That's no problem. It's more, I have enough for a gift, but there isn't a gift that I want anymore. Again, that's not a sign that like, well, character's fucking boring. Let's end the campaign. It's a flag. It's a flag for me to pay attention to. If there's nowhere that you feel you can go on a mechanical sense, does that also mean that there's nowhere for your character to go from a narrative sense? Because once that happens, you better end the game pretty fucking quick. Because if a character feels static like that, I'm not sure that there's much left to explore. So Werewolf does not have the same problem as High Essence Exalted. So you gotta also take this based on what I was just talking about. If I present a certain kind of challenge to players and then that challenge becomes difficult to replicate because they're getting higher and higher, and so then I have to come back with more complex combat, then that can be a problem. For sure. That's an issue if a player is like, well, I expected to be able to continue to win, and I'm like, well, I can't do that if I'm playing the game properly. That's an issue. But High Essence Exalted ends up being an issue also because we're a streamed game. A streamed game, we have added pressure on us to keep things interesting, moving at a clip. Now, some of that is because that's also how I like to play. I'm not a huge fan of playing in a game where every 5 minutes we have to stop, check the rules. Okay, but then I need a snack. I have to go to the bathroom. We come back. We play another 5 minutes. I got to check the rules. Or, okay, it's combat. All right, well, the storyteller's taking his turn, so that's going to be 45 minutes. High level play can often get to the point where it's so complicated that it just takes a long time. And for your home games, that might be fine. For a streamed game, all of us feel pressure. It's not pressure that people are putting on us intentionally. But if you have an audience, you want the audience to remain engaged as well. And audiences tend to check out sooner if they're not the ones making all the tactical decisions. So we don't want to play a game where that's an issue. And that's exactly what you are mentioning here. Which of my 47 charms should I use in this situation? A high level Exalted game may not be fun for the players because they might just be like, well, I got too many fucking options. That's also something that you can be like, that's not a crime to then say, I got powerful, now it's too complicated, and I'd rather not be that powerful anymore. If I were to run Exalted again, I would reduce the amount of XP that I hand out. Just straight up. Maybe at the beginning of the game, I would be like, for the first 10 sessions, we'll have the same amount of XP. I'm not making any guarantees at this point. I'm just thinking out loud. For the first 10 sessions, same amount of XP. And then the XP is going to get slashed because I want you to spend more time at the power levels that you are with the charms that you have. Because in Exalted Witch Nexus, we had characters who would buy a charm and not even get a chance to use it once before the next charm became available to them and they bought it. At which point then it just feels like you're climbing the ladder too fast and you're not experiencing and enjoying the character's progression. You're just hitting spikes. So the answer will be that if we play Exalted again, they will not be earning experience as quickly, assuming that we are going for a campaign that's open-ended, which I think is going to be the goal. And if it means that we get to the end of 100 sessions and they're all still Essence 2, maybe that's exactly where we want to be. I kind of doubt it. I think after 100 sessions, Essence 3 would probably be fine. But like, I didn't want to get to the point where I had players being like, well, I'm almost Essence 6. And I'm like, we've only been playing for 56 sessions. And I also don't think that you would be enjoying the tactics of such a high level game. And they didn't, especially because it was our first game that we were streaming. The technology that we had was different. We didn't have Kate's tech on screen that we had. I was literally typing into Notepad for a lot of it. We were focused on delivering a different kind of experience, and we just didn't want to go that high. Werewolf, the combats aren't becoming much more tactically different with the addition of gifts, because first of all, the gifts are coming slower, but also there aren't as many to worry about. So, Gwen, I'm not saying we're not playing Exalted. I'm just saying that I'm not announcing that we are playing Exalted. Also, just run Exalted on Pinky Pact. Play the better game. So, this is something important, Requiem. I think Essence 3 is the sweet spot for Exalted. Good area to start wrapping up, but that's just my opinion. I kind of agree. And that's also true for D&D in a lot of ways. Like level 20, I don't think level 20 is actually all that fun to play. Once you get so powerful that you're like basically stepping on everything else in the world, I don't know. I don't think the game is balanced very well around level 20 play. And I think that game balance becomes more and more difficult the higher power level it goes. Exalted is already a high-powered game right from the start, but at least it's expected. But an Exalted Essence 6 character is huge. And that's very difficult to balance in terms of play. Then, because also remember that since in a storyteller system game, it's a point buy, if I have two players, one of whom is like, I really put a lot of my points into bureaucracy and being really good at bureaucracy, and I have some combat charms, and then the other player's like, I just put all my thing in combat charms and resilience and stamina and stuff like that. And then I'm like, great, well, here's an enemy. At Essence 3, it's going to be a good fight, And sure, the bureaucracy-focused character is going to struggle a bit more in the fight, but it isn't like a foregone conclusion. In Essence 6, I could just straight up be like, I shoot you and you fucking die, and that's it. Right? Like, it's not quite, but it's becomes much, much harder to balance when some players have created characters that are combat monsters and some players have created characters that are not. Because another thing to remember is that there are games, players and storytellers alike, that assume that combat is the be-all and end-all, and what they're forgetting is that there are a lot of consequences to those sorts of things. If you're somebody who murders everybody in the street, well, in real life, that means that armies get raised to chase you down and kill you because people don't like the fact that somebody can kill anybody that they want. So sinking all your stats into combat and none into like politics is actually kind of unrealistic in a lot of ways in Exalted, but players don't necessarily see it that way. So we have it. There's a reason Baldur's Gate 3's level cap is where it is beyond the development cost of going higher, of course. Yep. I mean, we can get into that kind of thing as well, but that is the main issue that you will run into with high-powered games, is that they can become very difficult to navigate unless you're careful that everybody is at the same power level, which they can't be in a storyteller game, because power changes depending on the circumstance. Avatar of Cain says, I think having done a bunch of level 21 shots, which are obviously super different, I think to some extent you want level 20 or Essence 5 to be part of the climax for an actual campaign than a whole final arc. Quite possibly, yes. I mean, Exalted Nexus went up to Essence 5, and I'm still very happy with Exalted Nexus. I think I had a lot of fun. I think the players had a lot of fun. I just know that I would do it differently just because I think we had fun in spite of, as opposed to because of the fact that they hit Essence 5. In the same vein, like Avatar Legends The Mirror Scale, we had a lot of fun playing that campaign in spite of the fact that honestly we bumped up against its system. Its combat is not good, I don't think, period. It's not even like for us, I don't think its combat system is very good. I think they were trying something and it didn't work, and I don't quite know how it managed to get released. But you know, if other people enjoy it, then that's fine. I don't understand. I know that there are some combat systems out there that I don't like, but that's just because it's not to my taste. I just don't understand Avatar Legends combat system at all. But we still had a great time of that game. But it did indicate to us at a certain point, hey, everybody's like character sheets are maxed out, and we're not really having that much fun with the combat. So while we're enjoying the story, the mechanics are also something we enjoy in a game. So we decided to end that campaign after 24 sessions, which, you know, for some people that's like, damn, that's a long campaign. And for us, that's a shorter one. One day I will get the chance to play my high-level Twilight Cast Mega Structure Builder. Just let me build a magical underwater train to the Western Isles of my downtime already. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Like, that sounds great. But Flower of August is right here. Level 13 is a gigantic power spike in D&D, and it starts becoming a lot harder to handle things, just from an overall perspective at that point. Our average stream campaign is approaching 70 sessions. 24 is not that long, so let's go to the numbers, shall we? While we're waiting for other questions or comments to come in. If I open up our wiki, so Avatar Legends ended up with 22 episodes. I mean, we had a prologue. I don't think the prologue was actually played out. No, it wasn't. We played that privately. So that had 22 episodes. Riverwild had 11. Changeling the Streaming had 136 plus all the extra episodes, so it's actually closer to like 150, I think. I haven't done the exact count. You know what? Let's do the exact count. We actually can. I have the technology. 160. There were 160 separate streamed Changeling the Streaming episodes. So we're not quite there yet with Werewolf. Tell you that much. Exalted Academy ended up having 2 seasons totaling 40 streams. Exalted Nexus had 58. But it actually had 59. It's a little curious because we did have an April Fool's Day episode, and then Star Wars Reach only ended up having 9. So we kind of go back and forth, but Werewolf now is over 100. Changing the Streaming was 160 total in the end. So I don't know if they're throwing off the curve so much as we just know that we like long campaigns. Yeah, we bailed on the idea of seasons. We definitely did. So we had seasons at one point. We tried seasons with Exalted Academy because we were interested in having onboarding so that we can kind of say, hey, players, or audience, sorry, not players. Hey, audience, if you haven't watched, this is a good time to step in. We're starting a new season. Sure, you're going to be missing the backstory of these things, but like, it's a new season. It's time for you to step in and watch. And it turns out no one gave a fuck. No one cared. I can't think of a single person who was like, oh, you're starting a new season? I'll tune in when I wouldn't have already. Turns out people will just insist on either tuning in and being like, great, I'll get caught up, or they'll watch from the beginning. Seasons do not end up being a reasonable way to do that. So instead, no, there are some on the member channel, Requiem. I'll get there in a second. I just was curious about this. It just ended up not being useful. I'd rather do recaps every once in a while after like a story is finished, as opposed to saying like, we have a season. Because also between seasons, we were going to do things like play one shots, take a break. But in reality, I think that we came up with seasons at a time that we just hadn't found a campaign that was long lasting, that we were really enjoying. So we kind of were like, we will want to have some variety, but in this case, if we need variety, we'll just do it when we need to. Zablica, the thing is, I don't like saying that there's multiple campaigns, but they all have the same characters and the same locations and same NPCs and same universe. Then it just feels like it's multiple campaigns, but you could be right. Gwen says it was also intended to be an interest check for the players. If arcs are built around seasons and ending a season could also be ending a campaign. Yeah, but at this point, I think we kind of just decided that like we're just going to check in and naturally figure out whether we're having fun or the like. So, yeah, I don't know if we'll never come back to it again, but it didn't seem like it was that important. It would just have to be a new campaign. So in a way, actually, I think Zablica might be correct in that if we were ever to do it again, I think we would just be like, we're starting a new campaign, but the campaign is starting with experienced characters and they all have a backstory, which is right here and you can watch the whole thing. Except that also just, I don't know. I think that people who come in can be kind of disappointed when they feel like, but this was supposed to be the beginning, and it turns out that there's this whole shared experience and lore and language that other people who are watching have that I don't. Well, it can be really tough to then get them interested. So there is that. All right, going back to Discord here. Okay. Another couple of things from my flow. Ending fatigue. Such as when you just want to wrap things up, but still want a proper ending instead of just dropping things. That means that you have gone too long without figuring out when you wanted to end the game. That's fine. It happens. Just end it. But end it. Don't drop it, end it. If you feel like the game is ending soon, or the game needs to end soon, just end it soon. Talk with your players, say like, look, I'm done. I really want this campaign to end, but let's end it properly and let's come up with a plan. But if you're like, look, all I have in me is one session to do this, then take that one session. It's better than doing 0. And interesting, because we have the right person in here to talk about this. What is the origin of the Froyo sessions? Thoughts on how to make them good, and why do you do them in the first place? The origin of the Froyo sessions is Aragorn. Aragorn is the one who originally told us about, at the end of a campaign, it's tradition to get frozen yogurt and to talk out the campaign and talk about like the stuff. So a Froyo is kind of equal parts reunion episode and funeral in some ways, but hopefully without the depressing aspects to it. It's let's remember the stuff about the campaign that we really enjoyed. Let's take some time to acknowledge that we spent a lot of time in a campaign, a lot of hours in it. Like for instance, if you go by werewolf standards, at this point, let's do a conservative estimate and say that we play 2 hours a session. It's longer than that, but let's slice off. Let's make it just 2 for now. That means 200 hours went into this. 200 hours is a long time. 200 hours is like the equivalent of, these days, 200 hours can be, 20 seasons of a television show. I still remember when seasons were like 24 episodes as opposed to 10, but whatever. So that means that it's time to, reflect. It's time to celebrate. Talk about events that you might not have discussed for a long time. Figure out how characters, you can talk about like how characters might have changed if certain things happen differently. The idea is to celebrate, but not always. Specifically in Aragorn's game, they hit a wall. My character literally ascended to godhood and created a new reality. Nice. So we ate Froyo and decided the ending by talking it out rather than dice or whatnot. So that's another way to do an ending, and this is going to come up with one of the other questions that were put in here. Sometimes a game ends, and you don't have control over it. This is one of the ways to deal with it. Is you can just talk about it. Give yourself the closure that you need. That's kind of like what funerals are for. Funerals are for closure. They're for being like, this person is dead. We will remember this person, but we are also acknowledging that this person is not coming back. We're acknowledging that this person is gone. And it's a sad event for sure. And we don't like the fact that people are gone, but we also have to move on. We can't hold on to it forever. And a Froyo is a way to do that. Half a year of playing an MMO. So Osab brought up here. Are there things you do or handle differently when ending a campaign at a natural endpoint compared to ending due to less positive reasons? For instance, bouncing off a system or group dysfunction. So I'll go back to the campaign that I played, the Changeling campaign that was 13 years long. When my players broke up, or 2 of my 3 players broke up, and things just collapsed pretty precipitously. People were not talking to each other, not even just like between the 2 that broke up. It was a whole mess. And for my own sake, so that I could put the game to bed, I wrote an email and I sent it to all 3 of them, even though, like there were definitely still like rough feelings among them. So I didn't send it to them as like a message in a group chat so that everybody could talk about it. I did it in an email, and I suggested nothing about where the characters, the PCs, were going to go and what they were going to do. Nothing at all. I did not do that. I didn't do it on purpose. I wonder if I can find this email. That would be cool. I might actually still have it. I would have to find it in a very specific location, though. So let's see if we can, because I get the feeling like... Okay. I'm going to have to hope that I can find this. I'm not optimistic. So if I do a search, so I'm going to have to find advanced. I'm going to have to say that this is to... see if I can find it this way. I kind of doubt it. Because it's tough. So I'm only going to look for a little bit longer. Yeah, well, the thing is, I actually did clear out all my emails, so I have to open up a backup of my email to find it. That's the thing, and so it's not as simple as like being able to look normally. I have to look in an archive, which is not easy. And so this may end up becoming too difficult, but we'll try. At any rate, while it's running the search, I wrote an email, and instead of describing what the player character stories were, I described some of the key NPCs and I said, like, maybe this person has gone on and done this, and maybe this other person has gone on and done that. And what we do know is that, you know, like, there is a certain amount of peace that comes to it, and there may be more adventures and there may not be, but what we do know for now is that all of them are better for having experienced the game itself. At least that's what I recall. Again, this was a long time ago, a very long time ago. But I didn't make any presumptions, because I have had a game end where then the storyteller just said, here's where all the PCs ended up. This was a LARP, so there were many characters. I remember being annoyed because where my character ended up, I was like, my character never would have done that. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of what my character would do. And now the end of the game is that this character ends up, instead of hating vampires, my character loves vampires and works with them all the time now. And I'm like, no, that would be a face worse than death for me. And I would hate it. So that's not what ended up happening. All right, I may have found it. Let's scroll down. Let's see. Nope. Or this is only emails that I received, not emails that I was sending out. Okay. I see your game. So do not make assumptions for players on what their characters would do. Just don't do that. That is not great. Even if I can just say, oh no, that's not what happened, and ignore it. Like, there's still a little bit of like content in there that just makes me feel gross when I think about that game, and like it's tainted that game forever for me. So don't do that. Definitely don't do that. So never tell people how their character story ends. And still, if a game fizzles, also cut it off. It's a way to, I think that's a way that I can say it. Just cut it off. Don't keep holding on to this like this idea, this ideal that maybe the game will come back, and give everyone permission to move on from it by saying like, the game is over. And there might be people who will complain, but if you're being realistic and you're like, look, this is just not happening. It's not happening. Then they can feel free to let those characters and those stories go and move on. That's kind of a key thing to do. I think that's important. As much as it sucks to sort of put it that way, yeah, let it go. Oseb also asked, once the decision has been made to wind down a campaign, what do you expect or hope to see from the players? So again, we've talked about how I would want to talk about it with the players beforehand and find out what they want and all that. But here's something that I am going to do, which I don't like saying, this is what I expect from my players, and if they're good, they'll do this. But here I am actually going to do a little bit of that. This is advice that I'm handing out to everybody there who might be in this situation. If you know that a game is ending, for whatever reason, be enthusiastic about pushing for a great ending. Whining about how you don't want the game to end, complaining about how you wish that things were still going to keep happening, or pushing so that instead of the ending that is going to make everybody happy, it's an ending that like shows your discontent. Don't do it. What I expect from players, try to make sure that everybody at the table is having a good time. That includes the storyteller, game master, dungeon master, whatever you want to call them. Everybody should have a good time. And one of the things is, even if it's not your favorite thing that the game is going to end, you can absolutely ruin the whole shebang, every memory you have from that game, if you throw a tantrum at the end of it. So if you know the game is ending, players, accept it and then do the best that you can to make that ending as awesome as it deserves to be, instead of resisting that ending because you don't want to see it happen, which unfortunately does happen. And it is annoying, but it is sadly what it is. Let's see if that makes sense. Okay. Hey, Cassin. I'm going to make sure. Cassandra Riordan. There we go. I hope that I said that correctly. Been playing a Pathfinder second ed game for several years now. Not sure where it will end. If you're okay with it continuing, that's great. Keep it going. There's no reason why you have to stop if you're all having fun. But I'll reiterate something that I said earlier in the stream. You will be much, much happier if you get a proper ending to the game than if it fizzles. And the longer that you let it run with that ending, the more of a chance that you have of the game fizzling. And I don't think you want that, because that would be sad. It would be very sad. But yeah, hi. Thanks for poking a message in there. Let's see. Do I have any other questions here? Yes. So Zablika had a couple. Again, these are all on our Discord, so. How are the feelings when campaigns end similar or different to when you end the last book in a series and equivalent for other media? They're different just because role-playing is a more personal act of creation than a passive learning from it. But they should have the same kind of satisfying, like, that ending is one that I will remember. That ending is one that I enjoyed. The emotions that I felt were good. All of that stuff is stuff that I think that you would want to have. At least stuff that I would hope that you would have. All right, and then the last one that I think I see in Discord How can you tell when those feelings are getting too much or getting out of control? That's a question of bleed, and it isn't necessarily a question by the end of the game. But it is important to note, the end of a game is not an excuse to take all of your safeties off. It is... I ran a LARP once where it was a long-running LARP, and then in the last episode, some people did some things that they should have never done because they were like, I just wanted to see what would happen. And that kind of sucked, because they were just going gonzo. But then a couple of people started taking it way too much to heart. And then their in-character feelings started pushing out of character. And then when we were like, hey, maybe, take a break, take a rest, because this is getting kind of worrisome. And they were like, no, it's the last game. You're ruining the last game because I'm never going to get a chance to do this again. Stay safe. If your emotions are getting out of control, pop a safety card, do something in order to make sure that other people know that you're in distress. That's kind of the key. You don't want to get into a situation where you have you're being unsafe just because it's the last time. That's in fact when you want to make sure that you are maintaining that safety, because a bad session in the middle of a campaign is a lot easier to forget or to gloss over than a bad last session. Which also, by the way, you're allowed to do this. If your last session ends up kind of sucking, do it again. Retcon it. Do it again. Add another couple of sessions afterwards if you're not satisfied with the ending. That's okay. It's your thing. It's not like you have to, hire all the actors back and build the sets again. Just do it again. It's okay. Just do more. You're allowed. All of this is stuff that you are allowed to do. And that's kind of what makes it special. I won't see these people again. I can finally go mask off and mess with them for lulz. Yeah, kind of Flower of August. Now, Zablica, this sounds like an amazing idea for a film. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that just be great? Man, that would be awesome. All right. It looks like I'm not going to be able to find this. I may not be able to find this email, which is too bad. But that's okay. We'll all live. We'll all live. I mean, maybe I just have to look for it in a different place or longer, but we'll get there. There are worse reasons to invent a time machine? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just don't go full weird ass. I think it was Angel, or it was Buffy. It was either Buffy or Angel, and there was a whole episode where somebody decides to stop time because he's getting broken up with by his, like his relationship is ending, so he decides to go for like one last pity fuck, and then he stops time in the middle of it so that he can experience that moment forever. Ugh. No, thank you. That would be super bad. Let's see what else we had. When you Groundhog Day, the last LARP you ever played. Season 3 of LARP's Groundhog Day. I mean, I guess we can do that now. Sure, LFG. Let's fucking go. Sounds good to me. I would be down. Yeah. Now the right username. Ah, okay. Perfect. All right, folks. It's looking like season 3 of LARP's confirmed. Sadly, no. It's not going to happen. We know that it's not going to happen, and that's okay. That's okay. We're comfortable with that. It's been 10 years. It's time to let it go. Deserves to be let go. Yeah. So, folks, I appreciate the fact that you kind of all gathered here for an impromptu stream. Don't ruin it for a quick buck. There were no bucks to be made, Flower of August. There were no bucks to be made. At any rate, folks, let's call it there. Thanks for tuning in. I know that this was kind of impromptu, but I knew that there weren't a lot of streams happening in the week, so I'm glad that you managed to make it in. I still have to toy with this a little bit. One of the things that I want to try to do is figure out how to dual stream this so that we can also have a version of the stream happening at the same time in vertical mode so that you can be watching on your phone. I know that it's possible. I just didn't get enough time to figure that out until this point. Look, in terms of our patrons, I will actually show them off because I can. Let's just get a browser window open. You'll see some weird stuff. We'll interact with it. I can't do this properly just because it's... Normally I would do this properly, except that right now, I don't know the time and we're wrapping up. But, so with thanks to our patrons, we have a bunch of great ones. Oh, let's just expand this slightly. It needs more width. Kate's probably going to kill me for this. So we've got a lot of great patrons who've really helped us out, made sure that this is good. Again, clinic hours, because this is the kind of the first few ones that we did on YouTube, we're going to need to spend a bit more time to get this all together the way that it deserves to be. But it is much appreciated. Your support is helping us make sure that this channel continues to grow and expand and do cool things. Go watch Exalted Nexus. You'll see. We improved quite a bit, and it's all thanks to you. I'm leaking my email. My email is not hard to guess. It's really not that hard to guess. So, folks, just remember that if there's ever a point that you're playing in a game and something's happening and it's not going well and it's not what you want, it might not be the easiest thing to do, but it is usually the best thing to do, and it is to use your word hole. We'll see you next time.